were not at all seen by our data sets because we sort of ran into this wall of these data holes. So a couple of things to discuss here today include those. I also want to go into issues about GUS, the government of U.S., the global coastal event, banks, Bitcoin, silver, gold, weather, and then some other stuff that's pending. Basically, the situation that we have, or the understanding of our current situation that we have here at Half Past Human, is that the necessary background elements that were within the forecast matrix for the global coastal event are pretty much racking themselves up. This is to say that the emergence of the warfare issues in the Middle East, the social unrest, the breakdown of currencies, the degradation of the Federal Reserve firm, any number of elements, plus things we had not anticipated, like the seed vault and all these underground cities and so forth, all of those elements are still manifesting. They were described within that set, many of them, and we're getting into a period of time where those elements of the that were within the background for the global coastal event, if we want to look at it that way, are shaping up. So as long as they continue to manifest, we see no reason to suspect that we're not going to be blindsided by this upcoming global coastal event in a short period of time. The data holes are starting to really impact us. Plus, we found out that there's another form of data hole going on, which is actually there's two forms of it. One is the algorithmic, it's now come out that a lot of the news stories that are usually, we can usually count on, quote, news stories to incite topics of discussion from which certain language changes used to be able to be extracted. I say used to because now it's coming out that a lot of these news stories are algorithmically produced, therefore we'll always have the same set group of characteristics. I've looked at a lot of the headlines and so forth as a result of this story coming on out, and they're quite correct, and it does indeed influence our approach to gathering data, and we're going to have to eliminate a whole chunk of areas simply because they're now polluted by these basically computer-generated news stories that use the same emotional pitch and tone predictably. Probably we should have predicted the growth of the algorithmic news business and other algorithmic approaches to information dissemination, some of which I'd pegged. They were all background items, really. But I hadn't anticipated that one. Should have, because of the proliferation of programming talent into all different kinds of industries. It's bound to show up in many different forms. In any event, though, so that does impact us in certain areas. I think we can overcome that, but at the moment there's no time or energy to put towards examining the code that examines those areas. In any event, so it's yet another data hole. The more troublesome data holes at the moment, though, are these continuing and escalating distributed denial of service attacks. Some are very sophisticated that are going on. They're now reaching down into routers and controllers for devices, objects, all different kinds of things, non-human visited web addresses, that sort of a deal, any place they can gain a little bit of traction to power off from. So it's, as I say, it's very disturbing. It's blocking large areas of the net. WordPress was the most recent attack. It's a fairly intense area that we visit because of the newness and the number of postings there. It's like Facebook. There's a lot of daily traffic. In any event, so not only have we been hit by the growth of the immediacy data, and even that's been impacted because now there's things ongoing on a mass scale with Twitter wars. And so this has really escalated the amount of immediacy data that's flowing around. Not, that we were used to a fairly steady volume on that, but you get these Twitter wars and they can excite a whole lot of extra immediacy data to flow through. And in a sense, that's its own form of a data hole because it blocks the acquisition of other data for our process. So we've been hit very hard this month, especially with the, as I say, the DDoS attacks. Those are continuing, they're escalating. I'm hoping that it won't get to the point where in May the internet becomes like a third world electrical service, available a few hours a day if you happen to be lucky and on it at the same time as the bots are taking their breaks. But it certainly is shaping up that way for us. So our data holes are growing. These were predicted by that same large set that came in that predicted the majority of the global coastal event infrastructure or linguistic structure for us. So the appearance of the data holes was a prime necessity. I always figured it was to be the internet itself going down. We have instances of that. There's various places where the internet's up and down due to local conditions. But at the moment, it appears to be a software-driven, or actually human-driven, using software to plug the net up with these DDoS attacks. So that's going on. We also see that the necessary elements of Gus gone crazy, batshit crazy, really. And Gus is government of the U.S., which is the corporation, and it's attempting to exert itself over the entire United States, these United States. That was a necessary prerequisite for our global coastal event, and as we all know, Gus has gone batshit crazy. No need to dwell on any of the details there. They proliferate daily. Again, we have an issue where a necessary component to the global coastal event background matrix was the emergence of hyperinflation, and that's coming out. We saw a brief burst of it in Bitcoin, and it caused and Bitcoin fell back due to its own issues. You should go and listen to the Bitcoin report. I think it's episode 40 or 41. But also there were the beatdown on gold and silver, where they're dumping tons of paper gold onto the market, and I don't know how they manipulate silver, but they're doing that as well. And so that's a deliberate attempt by the powers that be to shore up the perception of the currencies not being in a hyperinflationary state. But people that are paying for things like petroleum here in the United States or Great Britain will soon see, they're already seeing the rise in prices in those things that they need, and also the shrinking in the availability and the sizes. So hyperinflation is here. It's starting to manifest. It's going to get, like all hyperinflations, it will run very high, very rapidly. And so that be, to have the shock component, I mean, it wouldn't be hyperinflation if it crept up on you over time. Hyperinflation, by its very nature, is a degradation of the currency, such that people flee the currency in basically a panic mode, such as we see with, continuing to see with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is oversubscribed, I don't know, maybe 50 or 80 to 1. Go out and try and find a coin if you don't believe me. I know some people are buying astronomically large amounts of them, 2,000 and 3,000 coins at a time. I don't know, A, where they get the ferns for that, or B, where they can find the damn coins. But more power to them. Anyway, though, so yes, just to let everybody know, yes, the recent collapse in the mine in Utah was the one that was forecast sometime back in our immediacy data intelligence report, and it will have the expected effects on the market. This is a little weird, though, because they're so heavily controlling the silver market and the gold market. It's going to be very surprising, I think, to see how the reduction of that much silver and gold in our mining effort will impact everything. The mine in question, as I understand it, supplies a mint which builds rounds, which are in turn sold to the U.S. Mint to make silver eagles. So those are already being rationed. So at this point, it looks like that's going to be another really hard hit for those, and how that will impact the price. Obviously, in the bizarro world in which we live, the sudden removal of this much silver from the planet will cause the price of all silver to crash. So be prepared for that. They're going to try and drive silver down to $22 an ounce. I say this facetiously. I mean, they would love to, but I say this facetiously because every time anything negative in the way of news comes out, they drive the price of the commodities down. And so here's a huge negative, so they've got to drive the price down hugely. So whatever it is today, I have no idea. They're probably going to drive it down they're trying to drive it down at least 20% to compensate for the loss of 10 or 20% of the silver market's supply here in the land of Gus. And so the banksters will do everything they can to do that. Now, they have another challenge coming up. So that's my little, yes, kudos for us. We got the mine collapse forecast. Correct. Now, in the rest of the sets around silver and gold that we've had here recently, though, there's been a pop about another incident or whatever that should hit, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm looking for the word severe as part of the linguistic set as the key descriptor I can hone in on for the mainstream media and or the top tier alternative media. It'll be referencing something that has just occurred as opposed to a discussion about, severe impacts from Bitcoin or, I don't know, a month back, anything along those lines. No, the word will be applied to a story that will be tied to that day's headline, that the day that the word appears, and it's a temporal marker for this next, let me see if I can come up with a good word for that, this next distension or internal pressure on the silver market. And so I expect to see a manifestation as a result of seeing these stories come on out within the silver market. Now, how that will manifest, I don't know. In the past, they've done everything they can to control prices and such, so there may be some margin kind of dinking around. There may be other legalistic tools that they have that I may be unaware of applied. But nonetheless, it will put, if they're able to patch against this distension, then it will put huge pressure. It would be as though they had a inner tube that they were blowing up, and it blew up too much in a particular area, and so they went around there and tied that area up with rope, trying to shrink it back down to the rest of the tube size. It will obviously affect the rest of the tube. That's the situation we're getting into. And so, like I say, expect to see that pop up Tuesday or Wednesday this coming week. This is the 14th here, so we're looking at, 16th, 17th. There's also going to be issues that we've got in our data sets here that will, as part of the background for the global coastal event, that are really starting to manifest as well. And that is this atypical, strange weather. And by atypical, I mean extra seasonal, out of season. So as an instance here yesterday, people in Seattle woke up to snow. Very, very, very infrequent to see snow under the conditions that we have here now, this far into spring. March, yeah, okay. Occasionally you might get snow in April if your winter is still continuing, but usually you're in a pattern that suggests that that's likely. We've had no such patterns. We've had patterns that were increasingly spring-like as we went forward, and this was just a snapback, oscillation back to winter storms of some intensity, and now we're getting cold, and I've had hailstorms here today, maybe a light snow in there with heavy rains, and we've got a lot of cold pouring down out of the Gulf of Alaska. So something recently has shifted within the jet stream structure at the 800 millibar level, likely as a response to the expulsions from the sun. But in any event, this is going to partner with the already extra seasonal atypical weather that's coming out of the Great Lakes region from the northern part of Canada and coming down into the central North American region. We also see another stream of this over in Europe, and then there's another further in, I think 3 or 4 of these appearing in across Russia through Siberia. And so they, seen from above, they look like little tendrils of cold that come on down and take a left turn. And I suspect that this is in some way related to a longer pattern that we may end up, if we live long enough, say, oh, the Ice Age started in 2013, this particular spring when this effect occurred. But it may be that it's an extremely long-term kind of thing, and we won't ever, none of us alive today will be able to actually look back and say that. Nonetheless, though, the impact on our weather over these next few weeks is very disturbing, because as part of the run-up to the global coastal event, we had within our data sets from 2003 descriptors that suggested extra seasonal, out-of-season weather, and that the out-of-season weather would be abrupt and would halt abruptly, and the mere halting of it alone was going to cause flooding. And that was part of the matrix against which we have the outbreak of hyperinflation that leads to extreme global unrest, financially or fiscally, that in turn precipitates planetary social unrest just as the global coastal event begins to unfold. So all of these precursors, or necessary background, not precursors, because they're not connected, they're not causal in any way, they were just part of the mosaic, the matrix that we had in which the global coastal event items could be identified. And so they are indeed appearing. We got wild-ass weather all across the planet in the northern hemisphere. If I'm correct, this will last maybe 2 or 3 weeks with some ferocity, and then abruptly just go away, and we'll be plunged into the middle of a hot and somewhat humid, flooded out spring, at the same time that we get hit by huge amounts of hyperinflation. What we could think of as bank failures, I don't know how that'll manifest, because apparently they're too big to fall over and die, and so they're going to rot standing in place, I guess. I don't know. At the same time that we'll see the hyperinflation in those areas that the government can't control, like the Bitcoin. So, and the necessary precursor to that, with Bitcoin coming into existence and having this run up and gaining the popularity that it has, is it's supportive of the global coastal event continuing, with the at least the usual level of delta from our level of doom. So in other words, our words have a tendency to concentrate negative effects, and because of the way that people express negative words more frequently than they do positive words, etc., etc. And so we collect more and it concentrates more and so on. However, I would be predisposed to say that when it comes to physical earth changes kind of stuff, where we were really accurate, 300,000 people killed and a nation kicked back to a previous age, there was no doom and gloom in our words that was not met. All of our linguistic structures were accurately, factually portrayed. Where we get into a real problem with the impact of the emotions is with the social and more political kind of abstractions, but in our work with where we've hit with weather and earthquakes and so on, it has been factually representative of the words that actually come on out. So, it's kind of a negative. I wish we were always wrong to a great degree in terms of the factual components of these kind of earth changes sort of things. But for instance, when we forecast 3 weeks ahead of time the power outage in the Northeast, it was a factual description. It wasn't in any way a concentrated doom version of it. It wasn't exaggerated to the actual circumstances, nor was it exaggerated to the language that came out. We've always known here that our work with weather and other elements of earth changes were more accurate at a linguistic level and much easier for us to validate because the language came out much more accurately and there was less room for interpretation. 300,000 people dead. Well, okay, you have an official claim of 279,000. I would say that, there's very little room for disagreement, and there's a whole lot of reason to suspect that no one really knows what the number is. So our monkey mind number of 300,000 was certainly within the range suggested, and all of these other issues. So from that viewpoint alone, as I say, we're preparing for a global coastal event to mature sometime, or to begin maturing sometime over the course of May. We don't know from our forecast what the follow-ons are from June forward because of the nature of the long-term data. And now that data holes emerging, we're not even going to be able to get much in the way of immediacy data, apparently. And what immediacy data we're getting is all flooded out with these damn Twitter wars. Anyway, so all of these necessary matrix issues are showing up. Very interesting time indeed relative to the global coastal event. I look for more actual manifestations to make themselves known, but I'm not actually looking for any more data to pop up. The way in which the data flows in a serendipitous mode is beyond our control. So also, because we think that the global coastal event will essentially catch all of the majority of the population off guard and be thought of as a unpredictable kind of an event, I also don't think that we'll get much warning. We have some factual representation to support this understanding, and that is that we did get warning of a number of weeks about the meteorites coming in over Russia. But under the circumstances, there was no warning ahead of that. Yet it was quite the powerful event. It had a great deal of emotional impact. It had a high intensity value. It splashed around the world rapidly. It had all of these indications that it should be able to be well forecast, but it was literally, and from out of space in a rapid period of time. And so in that sense, we got a bare few weeks of actual forecast that we had the meteorites coming in. So I'm of the opinion that because of the way that the data is now shading into immediacy data, and has been since early last year, so well over a year now, that, and in addition with the data holes, that we're very unlikely to get any greater level of warning or information ahead of any pending outbreak of events in May. We're getting all of the precursor events, as I say, lining up, including the weird ones like the sinkholes. Those are showing up in the news, and planet-wide. We have all of the mudslides, landslides, all of these kind of things showing up as forecast. We have the rips in the pipelines. Pretty soon, I suspect, by the way, we'll see a dam at risk. It may be within the global coastal event itself, because we don't have the ability to separate it temporally from that original data set. There was no way for us to know if the dam was actually ruptured during the global coastal event or happened a week or two ahead of it as a part of the planet stretching. But basically what's going to happen is a very large concrete dam of some size is going to separate from the one side of the structure that binds it to the rock, that helps it hold back the water. And we're going to see this. I don't know, like I say, if we'll actually see much in the way of press about it, because it may occur within the events of the global coastal event itself. And so its press impact may be totally lost on us because we expect to be isolated by very large earthquakes up here. Also disconcerting is that the Russians indeed are anxiously awaiting a West Coast earthquake on the U.S. from their understanding of the earth sciences, which I give a lot more credence to than some of the academia we've got here. They are anticipating a very large expansion event outbreak as the undersea area separates off the coast of Vancouver Island, and about 100 and some odd miles off the coast, by the way, in the far reaches of the Straits of Juan de Fuca, because they're of the opinion that is one of the 3 weakest points on the planet, most likely to pull back and separate as part of the expansion event. And it makes a lot of sense. And we're seeing the kinds of activity that would indeed suggest that. So, not a good sign for us guys up here, but, again, it's racking up as some of the stuff that makes sense against this outlandish idea that we're going to be hit out of the blue by some form of disruption in the southern hemisphere and the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans more or less simultaneously that will cause rather large disruptions to all of humanity that happens to live on the coast, and that is just a ton of us guys. Maybe greater than half of us might be affected directly in the coast, and then the rest might get inundations of, fishes and seawater, and who knows what's going to be tossed up into the air and then have to come back down again. And that's, a sort of a good description of the global coastal event. Now, why the hell would I give a shit about Bitcoin if that's my expectation? Well, in the meantime, I really want to annoy the powers that be. I want to get out of the American fern because it's dying, and everybody who gets out of the American fern puts yet more pressure on the powers that be and the Illuminati and these bastards. I want to deprive them of any energy, and there may actually be a point to it in that, at some point we may have electricity reconnected and we may get connected back to a global grid, and those Bitcoin may be valuable at that point again, and may have been a storehouse of my 2 silver dollars taking us forward. So I think Bitcoin is valuable that way. Also, we don't know. The only thing we have for sure from our projections is that we're isolated up here due to an earthquake that disrupts communications and bridges basically for 1,000 miles all around. That being the case, doesn't say to us that, New York loses electricity, or St. Louis, or, LA, or any of this kind of stuff. It does say that we are isolated as a result of that, and we have certain conditions and challenges here. But again, we don't have any indications as to how long it's going to take us to recover. And if it's just merely multiple years as opposed to multiple decades, well, hey, in the meantime, Bitcoin goes on. And we need something that is peer-to-peer, that is beyond the central bank model of killing, death, warfare, cheat, lie, maim, steal, killing, death, warfare, cheat, lie, maim, steal. I'm tired of that. I've seen that movie, and I'm tired of it, like I say. So even if all my Bitcoin goes away and all my effort goes away, fine. All I've done is transfer worthless American ferns into the Bitcoin wherever I could. Very few of them, because Bitcoin is awful damn hard to come by. And so I'm getting out of the worthless American fern. And so if the Bitcoin goes away, well, I'm quite sure then so will the American fern, and it's kind of a toss-up. Who cares either way? And I doubt also under those conditions, if Bitcoin and the American fern are both gone, that silver and gold are much more useful than mere local trading vehicles. And local may be restricted to, as far as you can walk in 2 days, because most people couldn't carry enough food to get them beyond 2 days, that kind of thing. So we'll see a radically different world if it becomes that disruptive. Now, we do have a couple of pending things I want to get to real quick before I get off and do some work here in the next little sun break. A sunbreak, for all you people that don't know, is when you got a little tiny hole in the clouds and the sun comes in and it's not raining on your head and soaking your feet for a few seconds here, and the sun may come on up, and so you strip off 6 or 8 layers of clothing, run outside real quick, and get something done before the next inundation and deluge. Now this is normal, the sunbreak idea and the line swells that we get here in the Pacific Northwest, but the temperatures, the ferocity, the winter storms, the atypical weather, none of that is normal. In any event, so this was just a short wujo to let everybody know that we do have these issues showing up, manifesting just in time for to provide us with the matrix for larger events for the global coastal event. Now, if that's the case, I expect to see huge levels of inflation. I expect to see a major bank failure, but like I say, I don't know if they'll allow it to collapse. It may be, but it'll make the news. You'll understand it's failed regardless of what words they use. And I also expect to see social unrest and disruption, not a direct result of any of that, but at the same time, in an increasing fashion, that will also be publicized because the powers that be will want to be using this as a justification for their next actions. And all of this will be happening over the next week or two. It's going to be a very intense time up through the 19th, I figure. And like I say, the next big issues for real money, gold and silver is probably going to be Tuesday, Wednesday in the morning. I'm looking for the word severe attached to some news. What else do we have here? Yeah. So on a personal level, I'm like George Ure. I'm out here busting my butt trying to get as much in the food production business that I can set up, given the weather, and which of course was, really impacting everything that's not in the Grow Dome. And I'm trying to get my boat, the Proa, finished. We actually have plans to set up after the Global Coastal event, assuming that we're in the recovery mode. We know we won't be doing necessarily what we're doing now because of isolation. So I'm setting up basically an Earth Changes Institute, if you will, in the sense I'm going to monitor and record local indicators of Earth changes, weather and environment sort of changes, and set the Proa up as a research station and a research vessel and a videography platform, assuming electricity, et cetera, and that we're not just merely struggling to survive. That kind of an issue. That's our goal, is to set something up to record and be able to forecast further changes. So sort of in the same line of work, but more locally focused, because we appear to be at only about 200 miles from a very unique part of the planet, which is going to have some serious upheaval. And also, I figure if we can get through the Global Coastal event and get on the other side of it, which might be a couple of years, we've got a lot of young people around here that don't know how to do things, so we're going to try and relocate and set up some kind of a situation where we can provide training to these poor bastards that, need to know how to build pole houses, because it's going to be unsafe to sink cement into the ground for some considerable time due to the earthquakes. Whatever the large earthquake is, whatever magnitude it is that hits us up here, I would expect perhaps 10 years of aftershocks that would be of a significant level. So, we may barely get done building a bridge up, and boom, there it goes down again because of another significant earthquake that's just ever so slightly smaller than the one that nailed it. These kind of issues are going to be things we have to face in our local environment, as well as all the radioactivity and all of the other issues, the effects of the chemtrail poisoning and so on. I'm also hopeful that chemtrails go away with the Global Coastal event. The data that we've got, those few bits of data that I am comfortable with, don't show the chemtrails being pumped out. They show us with very severe and extreme weather conditions as a result of that. As a result of no chemtrails, as a result of chemtrails finally being stopped in our local area. It shows us undergoing severe ecological change, whole levels of species under threat. The data sets that we had in 2003 and 4 that were referencing our area, I could not at that time give credence to, because I couldn't understand how it could occur. But we're looking at, the wholesale devastation and deforestation of perhaps hundreds of thousands of acres, perhaps square miles on a staggering level that we can't even imagine now, mostly through forest fires. As a result of the chemtrails stopping, they're going to fire off anyway, apparently, whether the chemtrails stop or not. The fire was always built into the data sets. But with the chemtrails stopping, there was a clear indicator, a clear temporal link between that and the following summer and fall, in which a huge level of the northern hemisphere went ablaze in North America as a result of the damage done by the chemtrails. Now, this is a horrific thing, but it's a necessary thing. I don't want to go through it, but the damage has been done. Now the purge and the reduction of it into resources, in the form of ash, etc., has to occur if we're to get on. The longer we delay this kind of thing, the worse it's going to get. As with the chemtrails, the longer they go on, the worse it's going to get. So anyway, though, like I say, there is some hope within our little meager few bits of data that no chemtrails. So we're basically saying because we have no evidence of it in the data, it is gone. So this is judging something by an absence of data, which is not a sound scientific principle, let me tell you. You don't usually, make forecasts and this kind of thing. But we have so little data based on that kind of stuff. We have so little data that is available to us from those sets that was beyond our data gap. And the data gap is certainly forming up now. So I'm of the opinion that, well, maybe there is some little bit of hope that the Gus goes away, goes batshit crazy, and somehow more or less dissolves in the global coastal event, or, gets washed out to sea or something. And also at the same time, the ability to continue the chemtrail program ceases rather abruptly. If that's the case, it's going to be really nasty, but in the end, hooray, because it's a change that we've got to go through in order to help the planet heal. Anyway, guys, I hope that covers all the questions. Bitcoin's going to go crazy. Within the hyperinflation, that'll be your first indicator, I think, or most consistent one of the levels of hyperinflation. How long that will last is, if we're accurate, it'll run to maybe the 20th of May, as somewhere in there, the global coastal event occurs. So enjoy it in the brief month or so while you can, or hooray for you guys if you're going to have it afterwards and you continue beyond, having electricity, etc., beyond our earthquake issues here. That would be quite nice for everybody all around, because then there will be people out there kicking Gus's ass, and that's probably why we don't have any Gus issues while we're trying to rebuild our social order after the earthquake whumps on us. Of course, I could be totally wrong about all of those. However, given the Banda Aceh quake, given the recent forecast of the, mine slide and a few other things, I'm going to have to cop to the line of, well, I could be wrong, but I don't think so. And that's really sad. It'd be nice to have a nice world in which I could just go sail about and retire, and even if I had to fight the nasty fascist bastard Illuminati demon tit-sucking money grubbing Zionist housing bankster bastards, hey, that wouldn't be so bad. So anyway, that's where we're at. I got to get out to it. I've got a few more minutes in a sunbreak and I can get something done in the dome. Let's see, last words on this one. Go and look at the Bitcoin report. Even the unbelievers with Bitcoin really need to examine what's going on with it, because it's more than just a trading vehicle. And pretty soon we'll have a thing called Ripple, which is a distributed exchange that runs in the same metaphoric space as Bitcoin itself, with a backbone and a blockchain. Kind of an approach that allows distributed shifting of the coins into various different kinds of other commodities, and so you won't even be required to deal with an exchange per se. You could be able to do it in the cloud, so to speak. This is assuming that electricity holds together, and I hope all this shit does come out and that the net stays up. But in this next month or so, I suspect that Bitcoin will be a very interesting gauge as the hyperinflation busts out here. How the powers that be are going to handle the reduction in the silver and what's coming on Tuesday, Wednesday, along with that word severe, how they're going to respond to that, I just don't know. If they can't respond, then it is my buddy Fort Worth guy JB. It's his ideal dream. It's his waking dream, where the bad guys are crumbling, the markets are freeing themselves, price structures are open to a fair exchange, the horror of what they can deliver and what they can't comes out, and true price value starts to accumulate. And under those circumstances, it's 5,000, 6,000 an ounce of gold, 500 and 600 an ounce of silver, and then silver starts seriously escalating even beyond that, raking into gold's territory, up until the point where maybe it goes to parity. I don't see all that happening in a month. Maybe it does. I don't know. It could probably happen far much more rapidly than I can imagine it, so I'm not ruling it out. And it was forecast in the background of the global coastal event, that level of hyperinflation hitting the American firm. And it hits it so hard that probably you could say justifiably it causes a considerable amount of social unrest that leads to all sorts of interesting discussions with many of the powers that be and their minions. And we'll just leave it at that. So a good period of discussions coming up after April 19th. And so the day after that is 420. Everybody relax a bit, and then we'll see what happens on the 21st. Bye, y'all.